NCERT based single sentence questions, locomotion and movement, part 2, skeletal system. Let's start. Skeletal system consists of framework of dash and a few. The skeletal system consists of framework of bones and few cartilages. Skeletal system has significant role in movement shown by the body. Imagine chewing food without dash bones, jaw bones, and walking around without the limb bones. Bone and cartilage are specialized connective tissues. What type of connective tissues? Specialized connective tissues. Dash has very hard matrix due to the presence of bone has very hard matrix due to the presence of calcium salts in it and has and the cartilage has slightly pliable matrix due to the presence of chondroitin salts. The two principal divisions of the skeletal system are the two principal divisions of skeletal system. We classify it into axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. Axial skeleton, appendicular skeleton. Skull, vertebral column, sternum, ribs are belongs to axial skeleton. Cranium, facial bone, hyoid belongs to skull. Frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, sphenoid, ethmoid bones are belongs to facial bones. Nasals, maxillae, zygomatic bones, lacrimal bones. Nasal, maxillae, zygomatic bone, lacrimal bone, parietal bone, inferior nasal conchae, omer, mandible are categorized under facial bones. Nasal septum, orbits, ear ossicles are belongs to nasal septum, orbits, ear ossicle belongs to skeletal structures which are associated with sense organs. Cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, coccyx are collectively called vertebral column. Manubrium, body, xiphoid processor belongs to sternum. Spine, acromion process, glenoid cavity are belongs to pectoral girdle. Ilium, ischium, pubis and acetabulum are belongs to pelvic girdle. Answer the number for given bones with respect to human. Axial skeleton number 80. Appendicular skeleton 126. In human, the total number of bones are 206. 206 bones are there, and in the skull, the number of bones in the skull are 22. Vertebral column 26. Vertebral column 26. Answer with the number for the given bone with respect to the human being. A. Cranium. Cranium number of bones are 8. B. Facial bone. Facial bones 14. Frontal bone 1. Parietal bones 2. Temporal bone 2. Occipital bone 1. Sphenoid bone. Number of sphenoid bones. Sphenoid bone, which is called keystone bone, the number is 1. The ethmoid bone 1. Nasals 2. Maxillae 2. Zygomatic bone 2. Answer with the number of given bones with respect to human. Lacrimal bone, 2. Palatin bone, 2. Inferior nasal concave, 2. Omer, 1. Mandible, 1. Answer with the number of for given bones with respect to human. A. Cervical vertebrae, 7. Thoracic vertebrae, 12. Lumbar vertebrae, 5. Sacral vertebrae, sacral vertebrae, 1 fused. Actually, there are 5. They get fused and form 1 only. Coccygeal vertebrae, 1 fused. Next, bones of the forelimb. Number of the bones in the forelimb. Bones of forelimb, 30. Carpals, 8. Metacarpals, 7. Phalanges, 14. Tibia, 1. Fibula, 1. Tarsals, 7. Metatarsals, 5. Phalanges of hind limb. In each limb, we are giving the number here, 14. Skeleton distributed along the main axis of the body is called axial skeleton. Dash from the heart, hard protective outer covering dash for the brain. Cranial bone. Cranial bone form the protective outer covering for the cranium. A single U-shaped bone is called hyoid bone. Present at the base of the buccal cavity. Present at the base of buccal cavity, and it is also included in the skull. Each middle ear contains 3 tiny bones called malleus, incus, stapes. Malleus, incus, stapes. And collectively called as ear acicle. They are collectively called ear acicle. The skull region articulates with the superior region of the vertebral column with the help of 2 occipital condyles. With the help of 2 occipital condyles, and hence called dicondylic skull. Hence called dicondylic skull. Our vertebral column is formed by serially repeated. Our vertebral column is formed by 26 serially arranged units called vertebrae, and they are dorsally placed. Vertebrae, and they are dorsally placed. Vertebral column extends from the base of the vertebral column, extend from the base of skull and constitute the main framework of trunk. Each vertebrae has a central hollow portion called neural canal, and through which the spinal cord is going to pass. The first vertebrae is called atlas, and it articulates with the occipital condyles of the skull. Occipital condyles of occipital bone. The vertebral column is differentiated into cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal regions starting from the skull. The number of cervical vertebrae are 7 in almost all mammals. including human being. The vertebral column protects. The vertebral column protects and supports the vertebral column, protects the spinal cord, and supports the head, serves as the point of attachment for the ribs, point of attachment for the ribs and the musculature of back. Flat bone of the ventral midline of the thorax is sternum. Each rib is a thin flat bone connected dorsally to the vertebral column and ventrally to the sternum. Answer these with respect to ribs. A. Total number. Total number of ribs are 12 pairs. B. True ribs. Number of true ribs. First 7 pairs are said to be true ribs. First 7 pairs are said to be true ribs. Next, vertebrochondral ribs. 8th, 9th, and 10th are called vertebrochondral ribs. Next, floating ribs. 11th and 12th are called floating ribs. Ribs has two articulation surfaces on its dorsal end, hence it is called bicephalic. Bicephalic. Ribs were attached to the thoracic cavity dorsally, connected to the sternum, and ventrally are called true ribs. Ribs were attached to the thoracic vertebrae dorsally, connected to the seventh rib with the help of cartilage are called vertebrochondral ribs. Vertebrochondral ribs. Or we can say them as false ribs. Next, ribs are attached to the thoracic vertebrae dorsally and not connected to the ventrally to any surface are called floating ribs. Dash vertebrae and dash together form the rib cage. Thoracic vertebrae, ribs and sternum together form rib cage. Type of cartilage used for the vertebrochondral ribs to connect the seventh rib, hyaline cartilage. The bones of the hand, forelimb are, the bones of the hand of forelimb are humerus, radius, ulna, and carpals, metacarpals, metacarpals, phalanges. Next, hind limbs, bones of hind limbs. Femur, tibia, fibula, tarsals, metatarsals, phalanges. A cup-shaped bone called patella cover the knee ventrally as it is called the kneecap. Dash and dash bone help in the articulation of the upper and lower limbs respectively with the axial skeleton. Pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle. Pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle, and respectively the pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle bones help in the articulation of the upper and lower limb respectively with the axial skeleton. Dash and dash girdle are formed of two halves, both pectoral and pelvic girdle. Each half of the pectoral girdle consists of clavicle, scapula. Large triangular flat bone situated in the dorsal part of the thorax between the second and seventh ribs is scapula. The dorsal flat triangular body of scapula has the slightly elevated ridge called spine, and which projects as a flat expanded process called as acromion process. Acromion process. Then the clavicle articulates with these. Clavicle articulates with this. In pectoral girdle, below the acromion process is a depression called glenoid cavity, which articulates with the head of humerus. Head of humerus to form shoulder joint, which is ball and socket joint. Long slender bone of pectoral girdle with two curvatures is called clavicle. Pelvic girdle consists of two coxal bones. The two coxal bones, each coxal bone is with ilium, ischium, and pubis. The two halves of the pelvic girdle meet dash to form the dash containing the two halves of the pelvic girdle. The two halves of the pelvic girdle ventrally meet to form pubic symphysis. The pubic symphysis and containing fibrous cartilage. Dash are essential for all types of movements, joints. Bone which is commonly called as collarbone, clavicle. At the point of fusion of the ilium, ischium, and pubis, there a cavity called acetabulum, to which the thigh bone articulate to form the ball and socket joint. Dash are points of contact between the bones or between bones and cartilages joints. Force generated by the muscle used to carry out the movement through joints, and where the joint acts as fulcrum. The movability at these joints vary depending on different factors. Based on these, we classified joints as synarthrosis, immovable joints, synarthrosis, amphiarthrosis, which are called slightly movable joint, diarthrosis, which are called movable joint. It is a functional classification. Structurally, we classify the joints as the fibrous joints, which are connected by fibrous connective tissue or cartilage, cartilaginous joints, which are connected by cartilage, synovial joint. Then sutures. Sutures connect skull bone. Sutures are made with dense fibrous connective tissue. Sutures about the movement of joint. The sutures movement, they are immovable, do not allow any movement. Suture do not allow any movement. Then we have one more question. The type of joint it is. The type of joint. Suture is what type of joint? It is a fibrous joint. It is immovable and it is fibrous. Identify the types of joints: fibrous, cartilaginous, synovial joint based on the given characteristics A, B, C. Here, actually, we don't have question here. Let's go through this. Identify the type of joint: fibrous, cartilaginous, synovial joint based on the given characteristics. Joints do not allow any movement. Fibrous joints. In general, fibrous joints do not allow any movement. The bones involved are joined together with the help of cartilaginous joints, we can see. Identify the type of joints as fibrous, cartilaginous, synovial joint based on the given characteristics. A. Joint help in locomotion and many other movements. Synovial joint. This type of joint is shown by the flat skull bone which fuse end to end with the help of dense fibrous connective tissue, that is suture, and that is fibrous joint. Then presence of fluid-filled synovial cavity between the articulating surfaces of the two bones, synovial joint. The joint between the adjacent vertebrae in the vertebral column, cartilaginous joint. Arrangement like a cavity and fluid allows considerable movement, synovial joint. This joint permits limited movements only, cartilaginous joint, amphiarthrosis. The joint between the humerus and glenoid cavity of pectoral girdle, synovial joint, ball and socket. Joint between the femur and acetabulum, ball and socket. Joint between the humerus and radius ulna, hinge joint. Joint between the femur and tibiofibula, hinge joint. Joint between the carpals, gliding joint. Joint between the tarsals, gliding joint. Joint between the atlas and axis, pivotal joint. Joint between the atlas and axis, pivotal joint. Joint between the carpal and metacarpal of the thumb, saddle joint. Then A. Suture. Suture is fibrous joint. B. Intervertebral joint. That is cartilaginous joint. The intervertebral joint is cartilaginous joint. Ball and socket, hinge, gliding joint, pivot and saddle joint are synovial joint. They are all called synovial joint. Suture. Based on the moment, suture is immovable. Intervertebral joint is slightly movable. Amphiarthrosis, we can see. Then the remaining, all these are completely movable. Why we call it as diarthrosis? We say them as diarthrosis, perfectly movable. Progressive degeneration of the skeletal muscle mostly due to this genetic disorder, myasthenia gravis. The rapid spasm, wild contraction, muscle due to low calcium in body fluid, muscular dystrophy. Wait. Here we did a small mistake. Here it is. Autoimmune disorder affecting neuromuscular junction leading to fatigue, weakening and paralysis of the skeletal muscle. Myasthenia gravis. Progressive degeneration of the skeletal muscle mostly due to genetic disorder. Muscular dystrophy. Rapid spasm, wild contraction muscle due to the low calcium ion, that is tetany. Inflammation of joints. Inflammation of joints is called arthritis. Age-related disorder characterized by decreased bone mass and increased chances of fractures. Osteoporosis. Inflammation of the joints due to the accumulation of uric acid crystals. Gout. Decreased levels of estrogen is a common cause for this skeletal disorder. Osteoporosis. This is locomotion and movement part 2. Thank you.